Honestly, I've never wanted to do this video for two reasons. One, it's been talked to death already. And number two, I don't really care. In fact, the only thing I do care about is the sound that each instrument makes and how I can harness that to make good music. So that's gonna be the purpose of this video. How would I actually use these instruments both live and in the studio? When would I reach for one over the other? And why am I making these decisions? So let's just jump right in. First thing we're gonna talk about is slap bass. Personally, I like to use a J bass for slap for one very specific reason. When you blend in both pickups equally, you get this natural scoop in the mids that just makes it a perfect EQ curve for slap bass. You go to the neck pickup, which is closer to where like a precision pickup is placed, it's still snappier sounding than a P bass would be. What I'm looking for in a good slap tone is a scooped out mid, a really sharp attack, and on the J bass, you're pretty much good to go. So if I'm slapping on a P bass, it's much more likely for an effect or a vibe, namely like 1970s disco or even funk. Think like Treasure by Bruno Mars. That's kind of the opposite of what you get with a J bass. It's not scooped out, it's honky and mid-rangey. Again, not a bad thing, but it's just particular and vibey, so that just means I use it less. Of course, that's not to say that you can't get a good scooped out slap tone from a P bass. For instance, I could run that same signal through this Phil Jones PE5 to scoop out the mids and add a little bit of sharpness to the attack, and I can get it pretty close to what a J bass would sound like. Now, when it comes to playing bass with a pick, I prefer the P bass. That natural scoop that I was talking about from the J bass just makes it too clean for this context for two reasons. One, I'm not a pick player, so I don't do it often. And number two, when I do play with a pick, I'm trying to make it sound dirtier. Or meaner, or at least thinner, which is exactly the opposite of what you get when you're playing with your fingers. So if I'm trying to get away from that sound, well, jumping over to a P bass just makes it easier. Plus, there's a little bit more meat in the low mids, which is where the J bass kind of naturally scoops when you blend in both pickups. So it's just a win for me. But of course, we can get great results playing with a pick on a J bass. If I just solo up the neck pickup, it's pretty close to the sound of a P bass. I call it a more hairy sounding P bass. It's similar, but not quite the same. If you solo up the bridge pickup, naturally the bass gets thinner sounding. So I just try to treat it like a baritone guitar. So I'm kind of taking more the vibe of a rhythm guitarist. course, it can sound funky as hell.
Everything you touch is gold. Such an icon. Yeah, they know you. Don't be afraid to let it go. When you take the floor, ooh, that's all yours.
And then, of course, you can blend both pickups together. You get that natural scoop, and it's a cleaner sound, but that's totally usable if that's what you're after. But honestly, if you played them both back to back, I bet you would have a hard time telling the difference. Now for a big, just full, round, generic bass tone that you could use on anything from 90s pop ballads to country and gospel and everything in between, I'm going to choose to reach again for the J bass. Honestly, my preference in this case is the same as it was for slap. Really, it's just laziness. It gets me closer to the sound I'm after because of that natural scoop you get in the mids. It just gets me closer to what I'm looking for just from plugging in. Of course, that's not to say that you can't get these kind of results from a P bass. In fact, it is infamously known for that. Get a P bass. You can't make it sound bad. Use it on every single song. All right, next we'll talk about funk music. And honestly, this is a category where really I could go either way.
Woke up on the right side of the bed.
I love playing funk on a J bass, especially that classic bridge pickup tone, a sound made infamous by Jaco Pastorius. But at the same time, a P bass can be funky as hell too, especially with that unmistakable growl that it has. It's got such a character to it. But when it comes to finger funk, I'm definitely going to say a J bass, and if you can, put some flat wound strings on it because it's going to cover up all of your finger slides. It'll mellow out the tone a little bit, and it's just going to make it sound super funky. Now, if you're looking for lots of smack in your tone, I think the J bass wins hands down. The addition of that bridge pickup adds so much articulation, so much attack that your right hand doesn't have to work as hard for. I mean, it's impossible to ignore that. Now there's tons of P basses out there with lots of smack in them. The J bass just does it better. Now when it comes to playing like classic rock, pop rock, singer-songwriter, those types of genres, I typically grab a P bass, but it's not for the reason that you think. I mean, it does sound great, but really it's because the person hiring you thinks that you should have a P bass. It's just what they're looking for.
Feeling sorry, hanging up hard, just 2 doors down. Let's party! Woo!
It'd be like showing up to an audition for a black metal band, but you're wearing a suit and tie and you're all clean shaven. Like, it's just the wrong fit. You need piercings, tattoos, makeup, and blood running down your face. You gotta play the part. And in my gigging experience, I've found that for this kind of music, the P bass is the right one. But of course, you can totally rock this kind of music on a J bass. I've done it tons of times. And again, it's very similar to a P bass. It's just got slightly more character to it.
Mrs. Barrington's at church. She's praying for the whole wide world. Barrington goes hunting for his son who hides beneath the bed. He's fighting mad. He's fighting mad. Barrington.
Now, if you're playing busier bass lines or solos, I typically will reach for a J bass for 2 reasons. Number 1, it's got a thinner neck profile, making it easier to play because it's smaller. Number 2, for all the reasons I keep bringing up, it's got that natural scoop, the extra articulation from the bridge pickup. It's just much cleaner. And when you're playing fast, clarity is king. Of course, you can play fast and busy lines on a P bass too.
So let's celebrate. Put you in a good mood.
Again, that mid-range honk that it has is so cool. It's got tons of character to it. So the way I look at it is this. If the J bass is squeaky clean, the P bass has a little bit of dirt on it. Now when it comes to playing old school tones, nothing beats the P bass with flat wound strings. It just gives you that classic, iconic James Jamerson tone, but honestly, even pressure wound strings. Of course, it's not to say that you couldn't get a great old school tone with an active 5-string J bass.
Love can make us strong, and we're in a bed. You can't prove me wrong.
The last thing we're going to talk about is whether I reach for a J bass or a P bass when it comes to playing heavy music. And the answer is neither. I like PJ basses for things that require more attack.
There's nowhere left to run, nothing left for you to hide from.
And I prefer humbuckers or soap bar pickups for bass lines that are a bit more acrobatic. Guys, in the battle of the basses, who comes out on top? Is it the P bass or the J bass? I'd say that about 99% of my work is done on a passive 4-string J bass. So if I had to pick one winner, I gotta say the J bass. Not that there's anything wrong with the P bass, right? It embodies greatness. all around in every way, shape, and form. But the J-Bass definitely gets the leg up because of its versatility and variety. But let's be honest, you can play almost anything with either of these two instruments and nobody will notice or even care. So go ahead and play whichever one you gravitate towards, regardless of anything that I've said or anything that anyone else does, and just go out and make more good music. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I especially want to say thank you to Zounds for loaning me all of the basses that you saw me playing today. Remember, there's links in the description. Go click on any of those. You'll be supporting the channel at the same time. I also want to say thank you to the Skeleton Crew, in particular, these names right over here. Y'all are the best. Make sure you go check out our channel memberships. We've got tons of awesome perks waiting for you there. Make sure you like and subscribe and turn on those notifications and stay well. We'll see you next time.